The July heat in Atlanta was a weight pressing slowly onto the asphalt, the humidity hanging in the air like a fog. The oppressive heat didn't just touch the skin, it seeped into the mind. On one such July evening, retired Captain Naomi Brooks was returning to Atlanta, feeling a heat her 48-year-old body was used to, but no longer craved. She carried only a backpack with her, a few clothes, an old journal, letters from her mother, and a handful of keys. But the real weight wasn't in the bag, it was in her heart. The marks left by 10 years in the deserts of Afghanistan, the silent years spent in Pentagon hallways, and of course the exhaustion of having to defend her identity everywhere she went. The Uber pulled up slowly by the side of the road. "Is this it, ma'am?" asked the young black driver. Naomi looked up. Yes, it was. The house where she had spent her childhood. The blue shutters had faded over the years, but the white rocking chair on the porch was still there. The lilies in the garden had wilted, but the scent of the earth was still familiar. Naomi got out of the car and only took her backpack from the trunk. She walked toward her home, the place she belonged. When she stood in front of the door, she sighed lightly. She pulled out the bright golden key, carefully inserted it into the lock. But something was wrong. The key wouldn't turn. Once, twice, 3 times. She even turned the key upside down, but it didn't work. She took a few steps back and looked at the door. It couldn't be the wrong house. Her mother's red rose tree was still standing. The lilies might be faded, but they were still there. The mailbox she had painted as a child was still in the front yard. Every inch of this house lived in her memory, and the deed was in her pocket. Naomi tried to turn the key one more time. Just then, the second-floor window of the neighboring house creaked open. A young white woman peered out, squinting at Naomi. She slowly raised her phone and started tapping something on the screen. Naomi felt her gaze but ignored it. It must be someone new. "My new neighbor," she murmured to herself. But just 3 minutes later, a hum began to rise from the street, then the sound of police sirens. Naomi turned around and saw 2 patrol cars swiftly pull up to the curb. The doors opened simultaneously. 2 white police officers stepped out. One was young, angry, and nervous. The other was older, more cautious. But both had their hands on their belts. "Show your hands!" the younger one shouted. He had drawn his gun. The sun glinted off the barrel. Naomi froze for a moment. What's going on?" she stammered. "We've received a report that you're disturbing the owner of this house," the older one said. "Show your ID immediately." Naomi reached for her backpack and slowly unzipped it. This is my house. Please," she started, but her sentence was cut off. The young officer suddenly shouted, "Hands up! Now!" Naomi, with her years of military training, reflexively raised her hands. But it was too fast for her, and too slow for them. In seconds, she was thrown to the ground. Her face pressed harshly against the hot sidewalk. Her wrists were cuffed behind her back. The concrete was hot, merciless, and humiliating. People from the houses on the street began to step outside. Some leaned out of windows, pulling out their phones to record. One neighbor sighed softly. Another muttered, "Good thing I'm recording." Naomi's voice was muffled, suppressed. I serve this country. This is my home." But the officers weren't listening. In their eyes, there was no fear, only procedure. In the back of the patrol car, Naomi pressed her head against the window. Everything had happened in just a few minutes, but time seemed to stretch, packing her entire life into those few moments. There had been no gunshot, but she felt more helpless than she had ever felt in Afghanistan. The young officer was still talking on the radio. The other one was silent. He glanced at Naomi out of the corner of his eye, but avoided making eye contact. He was uneasy, perhaps guilt, perhaps just a habit. The police station door squeaked open. Naomi was slowly escorted out of the car. They didn't remove her cuffs before taking her inside. One officer performed a search, silently, mechanically, as if Naomi were an object. "Your name?" the officer asked. "Naomi Brooks," she said, holding her head high. "Your date of birth?" "March 18th, 1977. The officer looked up. "Are you a military officer?" Naomi locked eyes with him. "Retired captain." The officer paused for a moment, then continued as if nothing had happened. "Wait in the holding room." She was alone in the cell. A metal bed, Gray walls, yellow fluorescent lights, a toilet, a few bugs, and the screams inside her. Naomi leaned back against the wall, pulling her knees to her chest. She breathed in, then out. She had faced death up close many times in Afghanistan, but the helplessness she felt now was deeper, because this threat wasn't coming from the outside. It was coming from within, her own country. A few years ago, she had given a briefing at the Pentagon. She had explained strategies to the highest-ranking officers in the country. That day, there had been silence in the room. Respect. Now, all she heard was the echo of the concrete walls. The old journal in her bag flashed before her eyes. The letters her mother had written. "No matter what happens, I'll be waiting for you when you come home," she had written. But her mother was gone now, and the house wasn't waiting for her. In fact, the house didn't even recognize her anymore. It was then that the first tear fell. Perhaps for the first time in years, she was crying. She hadn't cried in the war, or on duty, or in the Pentagon. But now, in a cell, on the edge of her childhood home, she was crying. Late that night, the door to her cell opened. A young woman entered, a determined look on her face, a briefcase in her hands. "Are you Naomi Brooks?" she asked. Naomi looked up. "Yes." The woman extended her hand. "I'm attorney Imani Fields. I came from Savannah. Your story has started to spread on social media. I'm here to help you." Naomi was stunned. "But how did you—" "So quickly." Imani smiled, a smile that was a mix of anger and determination. "Sometimes a single video can change everything." She showed Naomi a tablet. On the screen was a Twitter post, the moment Naomi was handcuffed. Beneath it was the hashtag #Justice for Naomi. "This is no longer just your story," Imani said. "It's all of ours." For the first time, Naomi smiled, a tired but hopeful smile. The footage of Naomi Brooks's arrest went viral within hours, sweeping across the internet. Initially shared by a small local TikTok account, it quickly spread to Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Many people shared the video with anger, asking, "How is it possible for someone to be arrested in front of their own home like this?" One user wrote, "Is this how we treat a retired Army officer trying to return home?" Another person cried, "This is how we honor Black women who have served this country." Hashtags emerged. Rashi Justice for Naomi. Nyenart Shun Welcome Home Captain. Renchich Heroine Treated Unjustly. The local press was silent at first, but as the anger on social media grew, Atlanta's local television stations started covering the incident. CNN Atlanta brought it up during their morning broadcast. As the images replayed on screen, the anchor's voice echoed in the background. Retired Captain Naomi Brooks was arrested in front of her own home. Was this a system error or a sign of a deeper problem? Imani Fields was a well-known, young, and determined civil rights lawyer, not only in Atlanta but across the state of Georgia. She had built a legal collective in Savannah that had won many cases, particularly in fighting against racial discrimination. The moment she saw Naomi's video, she instinctively knew she had to take on this case. After getting Naomi released from jail, Imani immediately got to work. First, she gathered Naomi's property deeds, military honor medals, and service records. Then she made a public statement. Naomi Brooks is a hero who served this country. She was humiliated, handcuffed, and arrested simply for trying to enter her own home. This isn't just a mistake. This is a blatant display of systemic racism. The statement quickly caught national attention. MSNBC, NBC News, and The Root picked up the story. CNN invited Imani onto their morning program. The first question was striking. Some people believe this was just a misunderstanding. "How much do you think racial elements played a role in this incident?" Imani responded directly, "If Naomi Brooks were a white man, we wouldn't be having this interview." The Atlanta Police Department initially tried to ignore the public backlash. They released a brief statement to the press. "Our officers responded to a call from a citizen, and standard procedures were followed." However, this explanation did little to quell the anger. On the contrary, it only fueled the fire on social media. The identities of the officers involved were quickly uncovered. The young officer, Kyle Denton, and the senior officer, Sergeant Mark Rayner, were identified. Reports about Denton's previous questionable behavior, especially his disproportionate targeting of Black men, resurfaced. Following these developments, the Atlanta Police Department announced that the two officers had been placed on administrative leave to calm the public. But for Naomi and Imani, this wasn't a victory. It was just the beginning. After her release, Naomi temporarily stayed in a guest house next to Imani's office. She couldn't go back to her apartment because the building manager had said, "We've changed the locks until the situation is resolved." Yet the deed to the apartment was still in Naomi's name. Imani responded harshly to this. The lawyer made a public statement. "A citizen is being kept from her own property. This is an unlawful act of property theft." In response, some neighbors began to support Naomi. One former neighbor, Marla Jenkins, told a local newspaper, "I've known Naomi since she was a child. Her mother used to plant lilies here. That house belongs to them. Everyone knows that. This is a great injustice." But not everyone in the neighborhood shared Marla's views. Amanda Rowe, the young woman who had sent the video to the police, secretly gave an interview to a TV channel. "I thought she was threatening me. She had a backpack. How was I supposed to know? I thought a new family was living there." When Naomi heard these words, she simply nodded. "The uniform on our backs is invisible, but it's still there," she said. "My backpack is a threat. My skin is suspicion." Naomi's military comrades began to reach out to her one by one when they heard the news. Particularly Commander Rita Alvarez, who had served with Naomi in Afghanistan, gave an interview to CNN. "Captain Brooks was one of the smartest and most resilient officers in our unit. The police officers who treated her this way have betrayed the values of this country." Retired General Carl Jenkins from the Pentagon also expressed his support for Naomi on social media. "Is this how we treat women who go to war for our country?" His tweet was retweeted millions of times. Veteran communities rallied together. The hashtag #veterans for Naomi trended on Twitter. Some black members of the Georgia state legislature demanded that a hearing be held to investigate the incident. Imani filed individual lawsuits against both the Atlanta Police Department and the officers involved on Naomi's behalf. The charges were unlawful arrest, racial profiling, unauthorized interference with private property, defamation of character and reputation. The defense's initial argument was that the incident was part of standard procedure. However, Imani demanded the police body cam footage. The recordings presented in court clearly showed Officer Denton drawing his gun without listening to Naomi and Sergeant Rayner failing to intervene. The video also clearly captured Naomi's words as she was being handcuffed. "This is my home. I am a retired soldier. Please." These recordings left a deep impact on the jury. After the preliminary hearing, the judge decided to expedite the trial process. After weeks of silence, Naomi finally spoke before the cameras. She was accompanied by Imani and her supporters. When the microphones were handed to her, she remained silent for a few seconds. Then she spoke. "I am Naomi Brooks. I fought for this country. I spent months in the desert heat, keeping watch at night. But when I came home, what I faced was colder than the battlefield. I am no enemy to anyone, but I demand the respect I deserve. This is not just my fight. It's the fight of every silenced person." Her words were shared millions of times on social media. Famous artists, athletes, and activists posted messages of support for Naomi. Beyoncé's single sentence on Twitter made waves. "We owe you, Captain Brooks." After months of preparation, a trial date was set. September 22nd, 2025. Naomi's story had become more than just a legal case. It had become a symbol. On that trial day, it wasn't just her rights that would be on trial. It was the trust in the system, the concept of justice, and the nation's conscience. As Naomi waited for the morning of the trial, she wrote this note in her journal. "I've fought in a uniform for years. Now I will fight again in a uniform without a war. This time the battle is in the courtroom. My weapon is the truth. My shield is the people." September 22nd was one of the most important days of Naomi's life. When she woke up that morning, there was still that prickling sensation in her body, but there was a difference. This time, there was no fear. After years of struggle, she had finally reached a platform where she could defend what was rightfully hers. Imani smiled at her. "Today is your day, Naomi." In the defense room, Imani and Naomi reviewed their notes one last time. Naomi made her decision clear once again. Today, she would not just defend herself, but all the women who had been silenced for years. As they entered the courtroom, Naomi wasn't just facing the guilty officers. The courtroom was packed with journalists, activists, and Naomi supporters. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the big moment. When the trial began, defense attorney Imani Fields suggested Naomi make her own defense. Naomi paused for a few seconds, then, with steady resolve, turned to address the courtroom. As you may expect, the reason I stand here today is not just to defend myself. This is the defense of all women, all colors, all voices. What brought me here was not the violence the police officers inflicted on me, but the helplessness in their eyes. The oppression they imposed on me is, in fact, a rebellion against their own system. A silence spread throughout the room with every word Naomi spoke. The jury listened attentively, captivated by the calmness and determination in Naomi's voice. Her strength resonated throughout the courtroom. The prosecutor, in a dramatic move, began directly questioning Sergeant Mark Rayner. The prosecutor laid bare the unjust treatment Rayner had subjected Naomi to, exposing the disrespect he showed toward the woman and veteran. How did you justify arresting a retired soldier? A woman who, when she simply said, "This is my house," why did you feel the need to approach her with violence? Rayner struggled to answer the question, his eyes avoiding the prosecutor's gaze. The questions continued, each one revealing more contradictions in his story. As Rayner faltered, attorney Imani made her move. "Sergeant, isn't it true? You referred to Naomi as the woman trying to enter her own house. But in fact, wasn't it you who was trying to enter her home? A retired soldier, someone who served her country. What right did you have to treat her this way?" Rayner lowered his head, unable to find a defense. Naomi's power had shifted the atmosphere in the room. As the day continued, Naomi's defense highlighted just how far justice could seem to be, but also how a woman's determination could bring it back. In the final moments, as the defense team asked Naomi for her last words, her voice was strong and clear. "We fought together, we returned together. The blood shed for this country is not just one person's blood, it is the blood of all of us. But after the war, we chose to stand side by side to protect justice. Winning this case is not just my victory, it's the victory of all Black women, all victims, of every woman unjustly arrested, of every woman pushed down." Her words echoed in the courtroom. Many people could not hold back their tears as they looked toward the door. The only thing left in the room was Naomi's defense and her unwavering determination. What she said was not just the moment, it was the essence of a struggle that had lasted for years. After the trial concluded, the jury deliberated intensely. Several hours of discussion later, they reached a decision. In the heavy silence of the courtroom, the judge finally spoke. "The jury has found that the defendant officers used excessive force against Naomi Brooks and unlawfully detained her. Additionally, Sergeant Mark Rayner and Officer Kyle Denton severely harmed Naomi's and the community's rights." A look of relief and triumph shone in Naomi's eyes. But nothing spilled over. In that moment, it was only the power of righteousness that represented her quiet victory. That day, Naomi Brooks did not just win a personal victory. The case she won became a symbol against racism, injustice, and male dominance. Naomi's triumph in the courtroom was not just a legal victory. It was a fight for a people, for a community. Her return home made headlines across the media. She was no longer just a former soldier, but a hero who had pursued justice for the people. New government proposals and talks about police reform reflected the enormous impact of Naomi's struggle. Outside the courtroom, Naomi shared her final words. "This battle isn't over. This victory is just one step. We will continue to fight for a world where true justice prevails, where every woman and every person's rights are defended. But this time, we fight together."